Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's now 8:33. Good morning. And I am Laura McClady, one of the facilitators, along with Jackie Walton, Edwards Walton, Natalie McEra, and Rita Cheryl that's here with us this morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum. And as you know, you've read our announcement, we have the candidates in the contested races for North Carolina Senate that have been invited today. If we have any candidates, if you would come up here and sit. And what we'd like to do for those that are here for the first time, we'll introduce you. We'd like to start off with the word of prayer. So we're going to ask Rita Cheryl if she would lead us in a word of prayer. Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Would you bow your heads as we pray, please? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for seeing, hearing, and feeling another day, another week. The Cultural Diversity Awareness Week. We realize that things may happen around us, and things may happen to us, but only the things that really count are the things that happen in us. We thank you today for being in us. Continue to bless this forum and us as we venture to bring to our communities news, relevant news, candidates, relevant candidates. Remember the children every place, Father. Remember Sarah Stevenson. Bless our crazy nation. Bless our city, our state, our county, our communities. Bless our children every place. It's in your Son Jesus' name we pray. Let us stay together. Amen. Thank you so much. Do we have anyone that's here for the first time? If we could stand up and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cameron Pruitt. I lead the Ultimate Democrats here in Mecklenburg County and just excited to be here.
Thank you for coming, Cameron. Are you here for the first time in your life? Okay. Okay, we'd like to say welcome and to let you know we have our presenters that are here and we will let them introduce themselves. And once they are presented, they have an opportunity, we have an opportunity as an audience to ask them questions. And we facilitate the questions and the answering session. We have a timekeeper and we have 3 that are here this morning. So far, we don't know who else will be coming in later on. That's in these contested areas. But we have a timekeeper, Natalie, who is our timekeeper, and we will allow them to give us a two-minute presentation, after which we will allow you, we recognize you by show of hands. Whoever raised their hand first, that's just the first person. And it's usually Tommy Robinson, I will tell you that. So, but they will get the first person. We try to be respectful. We do not debate here. Once you ask your one question, we allow them to give an answer or respond. And we ask you if you want to direct your question to an individual, we ask you to do that as well. Direct it to that person. If you want all to answer the question, then you direct it to all of the candidates. So we also want you to understand, and to our candidates in particular, we do live streaming and Facebook Live. And so it's videotaped and it will be kept in our archives as well. And Steve Johnson, of course, and I failed to mention his name, is one of our facilitators that handles all of our technology right now, along with Rashid, who is our youngest member that has joined us, as one of the members of the facilitators for Tuesday Morning Forum. But we welcome you. Be reminded, no debating. Once you answer your question, we go on to the next person. And to let you know, we never know. We send this announcement out on Sunday nights. We never know who's going to attend. So we don't know how many people are coming in and out, but they come in respectfully and they leave respectfully. So don't worry about that. So we're starting out with this number. People that are here, it may be filled before you leave. People may have to leave early. So just to make you aware of that. So once again, we welcome you. And if you would just follow our rules and regulations on what we do here at the Tuesday Morning Forum, we appreciate it. And we do invite you to come back. Some of our candidates come through and we never see them again until it's another election. But we invite you to come back, join us. This is one of our other facilitators, Winston Robinson, who just walked in as well. And of course, Rashid. And so we would like for you to just feel free to flow, and let's keep it as respectful as we possibly can. So we're going to start off with Joyce. She's a regular at Tuesday Morning Forum, and she's over here at the end, and she's a female, so we're going to start off with Joyce. And she's going to give 2 minutes. Natalie will let her know when her 2 minutes are up, and we would just go from this end to that end. And as the questions are being asked, we will facilitate as to whether or not who will answer the question, answer the question first. Okay. So without any further ado, Joyce.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone.
Morning.
I feel like I'm back with family. My name is Joyce Waddell, and I am seeking my 5th term in the North Carolina General Assembly, representing Senate District 40. Senate District 40 includes UNCC, we go down Albemarle Road, Sharon Amity, Mint Hill, J.H. Gunn area, W.T. Harris, and I am a proud Democrat, always have been. I am a public servant, always have been. I'm an educator, retired educator. I hold degrees from A&T State University, Appalachian State, UNC, and the PhD from the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, often known as UNCG. I was elected for 2 terms on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, where I served you proudly. In the middle of my 2nd term, we were going back and forth to Raleigh so much, talking with our legislators. And so my colleagues said, why don't you seek a position in Raleigh where you can be there? Well, that opportunity came for me, and I did. I've been a classroom teacher, school administrator, a college professor, school principal. I retired from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools after 30 years as an educator. I served the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools for 12 years in professional development, writing curriculum, training teachers, and recruiting teachers. In Raleigh, I have filed bills every year for increased pay for teachers, increased cost of living for retirees, lifetime licensure for administrators. And my committees in Raleigh includes education, appropriations in education, finance, prison safety. I am your servant seeking my 5th term. I need your vote, your support for you to send me back. I am Joyce Waddell, representing Senate District 40.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is DeAndrea Salvador, where I proudly represent Senate District 39. As far as the new lines of Senate District 39, they essentially start in Steel Creek, about half of Pineville, come up South Boulevard, Tryon, and encompass a little bit of like Clanton Park, South End, Cotswold, Dilworth, South Park, as well as a little bit of like Randover and Eastover areas. So it's quite a long district. A little bit about me. I was elected for the first time in 2020. So I'm seeking my second term in the North Carolina State Senate. Personally, born and raised from Charlotte, and though I'm sure you all can guess I'm rather young, I have done service from even a really early age, whether that was in high school, working in local communities here against secondhand smoke in parks, to after I graduated, founding a nonprofit on energy affordability. I think for me, a central part which my grandparents instilled in me is making sure that you are working with and supporting the community that supported you and made you who you are today. And I take those very same values with me to the North Carolina General Assembly. I think is evident in a number of the bills that I introduced in my first term, as well as supported with my colleagues here. In my first term, I either sponsored or co-sponsored over 100 bills, ranging from supporting things like Senator Waddell's teacher pay raises, restoring master's pay, making for a cleaner air and environment, as well as a number of healthcare and other issues, such as a version of Alma Adams' Momnibus, but at the state level, where we work with her office to introduce that for the state. So I look forward to sharing more about me today, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm jealous of your coffee. I came in too late to grab a cup. I'll get some after. I'm Natasha Marcus. I serve in the North Carolina Senate as well. Proud to serve with both Senators Waddell and Salvador. I am currently finishing my second term. I got elected in 2018. I was part of the group that broke the Republican supermajority in Raleigh. So when we got there, we shook things up quite a bit. And I am proud to represent North Mecklenburg is the part of my district that I've always represented and mostly still will under the new maps. And now my district comes all the way down to the airport, including most of what we call West Charlotte. So Enderley Park and historic Camp Green, near Coolwood, all of that area is also in my district now. I've been knocking doors there a lot lately, making sure people there know who I am and that I know who they are. And that's the kind of senator I want to be. I consider myself to be really approachable. One of my main jobs, in my opinion, is to inform my constituents about what's happening in Raleigh. I don't think the local media covers much of what goes on in Raleigh, and I think our interests are impacted regularly by what happens in Raleigh. And so I put out a newsletter every other Friday. I always answer my own emails, very responsive to constituents. My background is I'm a mom of two adult daughters, one of whom is married to a service member in the U.S. Navy. I am a lawyer by trade. I haven't practiced in a while, but I do have my law degree. Practiced here in Greensboro here in North Carolina before I moved to the Charlotte area. And just prior to taking my job in the Senate, I worked at a community center called the Ada Jenkins Center up in Davidson, where I live. I had volunteered there for 10 years, and then I worked there for a year and a half, and it's a center to help people get back on their feet when they're facing economic difficulties. The amount of time, so I'll stop there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Bobbie Shields, and I'm running for North Carolina Senate to represent District 40. This is my third time running for the seat. And right up front, I will say I am not running against Senator Joyce Waddell. I am running to represent the people in District 40 because I believe I'm the best candidate. I've been in Charlotte and Mecklenburg for a long time. Came here in 1975, took a job at Duke Power Company and worked to provide electricity around this particular region. After that, I took a job with Mecklenburg County, came in as a deputy county engineer. After about 1 year, I became the county engineer and was responsible for a number of programs affecting the communities here. I was in that particular role for approximately 16 years. And then I moved up into the manager's office. In the manager's office, my responsibility expanded. I worked very hard to try to meet the needs of the citizens right here in this community. I still live in the same district that I lived in when I came to Mecklenburg County, that District 40. I love the people in the district. I believe I have a lot to offer, and that's why I'm running. And I look forward to being able to answer questions that you might have. Again, I'm Bobbie Shields, running for North Carolina Senate to represent the people in District 40.
Thank you all so much. Our first question, Jack. Oh. Did you? Okay, Tommy, I'm sorry.
My question is, did your community elect you to run? Or what made you think you would be a good representative of your community? Who told you to run?
Is this for everybody?
Everybody, yeah.
Okay, let's start with Bobbie.
Okay. Well, actually, I probably touched on that in my introduction, but nobody really asked me to run. But I know what the needs are in the district, and so I decided to run. Fortunately, I was retired, and although I had lots of stuff to do, I looked out and said, you know, I can do much more than what I'm doing. I've had contacts in the community. It's very interesting. I thought that people would ask me to run because I have a strong relationship with people who live in both Hidden Valley and also in Hampshire Hills. But I got a rude awakening during the last election because I just knew that I would have lots of support from people who know about the work I have done in this community. Do you know I received single-digit votes in both Hidden Valley and Hampshire Hills? Do you know why? Because of the aura behind my name. For 2 weeks, I was actually an unaffiliated person. But I said, no, that's not me. There's no need to hide. I believe that we can do better than what we're doing. I switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. I switched back to the Republican Party, and people told me recently, you know, he might be a Republican, but he's a liberal Republican. Some people would say that a liberal Republican is the same as a moderate Democrat. In the system we have in North Carolina, unfortunately, you have to choose. I am not extreme to the right. I am not extreme to the left. I am me. I offer my service for this community. I've done it for 47 years, and my plan is to continue.
Okay.
So I have always been interested in politics. My father ran campaigns when I was a kid, so that's where the spark of it, I think, came from, the interest. And the reason I decided to run for this office was twofold. One, I had volunteered heavily. I was a neighborhood team leader on the Obama campaign, both times he ran. And through that volunteer role, had made a lot of great connections with politically minded people who wanted change for our state, for our nation. And they saw me as a leader of that volunteer team and had kind of looked to me as someone to lead the charge, so to speak. And so when the district map changed, the seat that the senator who represented my area for so long was a Republican, and the maps were drawn to save him that seat. So it was kind of impossible for a Democrat to ever win. But when the court started forcing them to change the maps, it became one of those like, hey, wait a minute, this might be one where if we had a Democrat who would run hard and work hard, could win. And so these friends of mine kind of pushed me to the front and said, Natasha, we think it should be you. And I looked at my life and I thought, well, the pay is terrible. You may want to know. The pay is $13,800 a year. That's all they pay us to do this job. So you got to think, is this a job I would even want? It makes you go to Raleigh for most of the week, most weeks of the year. But I thought about it and I thought, I think I could win this. I think I've got the network of friends and volunteers to help me win this. And I think these issues are important enough that I should do it. So I ran and was fortunate to have won.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was less of a straight path to realize I would be in this office, but working in nonprofits, I quickly learned how much policy is important to making an impact. So as a specific example, our nonprofit dealt with energy affordability in certain programs. And there were programs that we could literally do in South Carolina or other states, like a 15, 20-minute drive. And you would see it on our website and we're like, we're going to save you this much money on your bill. And people would say, well, why can South Carolina get that program? But I'm 15 minutes across the border and I can't. And I found myself repetitively saying, well, it's because legislators, it's because the things that are happening in Raleigh, and it's these decisions that are sometimes made in silos that have a direct impact on people's lives. And I think that got me, and I was already just civically minded, but it got me to be more active as I saw those very true and real impacts. And like Senator Marcus, in 2019, there was a court-ordered redraw of the maps. And I think it was late November. I actually was traveling for work and folks started reaching out to me saying, have you seen this new Senate map? And I said, no, I'm working. I have no reason to. And I really thought it was a ridiculous idea for someone my age with having 2 small children to even consider it. But as I looked at the map, I saw so many places. I saw my church, I saw my high school, I saw so many people in areas that meant so much to me. And as I started to just reach out to people, as I learned about the idea, I kept getting so many, you should go for it, so that it stopped being ridiculous and impossible and really suddenly started looking like a tangible thing where I could flip a seat and make an impact in the North Carolina State Senate. So in really about a 10-day period, I went from not really having politics on my radar to running a campaign. And, I'm so fortunate and glad to do it. I've had people, and I was senior class president at my high school. I had people who said, hey, it's so great. I voted for you for senior class president, and now I'm voting now. I haven't really been that engaged. And so for me, I'm fortunate. I know that there's even, especially as these districts change every year, you have the constant battle to reach out to people and make sure they know about you and what you're doing. But I'm fortunate to have had that experience to motivate me to run.
Okay, Joyce.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I worked with this community ever since 1974. For 10 years, I was the precinct chair for 105, and I kept that precinct alive. Sometimes I had to go pick up people in my car and hold the precinct meetings at my house, but it was necessary because as a Democrat, we knew that we needed Democrats. We knew that elections were important and we had to do it. So that gave me an opportunity to work in the community, in my community, with constituents, with those who believed in voting and the voting process. Also, I was a member of the Democratic Women, and we worked tirelessly getting out the vote. I served as an officer there, and our emphasis was getting women elected, making a difference in our community. Another 10 years, I served as an officer in the Black Political Caucus, vice president, financial secretary, and chaired various committees working in the political arena. So I'm not a novice. I'm not new to it. I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And as I continue to do it, I was elected to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education for 2 terms. My first term, there were 9 people seeking the position. It was very hard work. But I stayed in the community, stayed with my constituents, visited schools, worked on programs, and I was elected. I was elected a second time. And as we were leaving, there came a position in Raleigh, because we've been going back and forth to Raleigh all the time to talk to legislators. So this position became available. 5 people were running for the position. I didn't know if I could win it, but I did. And I became your senator, Democratic senator, and I continue to serve you. I'm proud of my colleagues, Senator Salvador, and also Senator Marcus. We work very closely together in Raleigh.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next question is Jackie.
Good morning. There's been quite a bit of discussion about contested federal races being put in the hands of North Carolina General Assembly rather than the Supreme Court. What is your thinking on that?
And that's for everyone, Jackie?
Yes, please.
Okay, we're gonna start off with Natasha.
Oh, okay. At first I was confused by the question, but I think what you're referring to is the independent state legislatures theory, and that's such a great question. I love that people follow. I hope people are following the details of that Supreme Court case. Basically, what Republicans, those with whom we serve, the very Republicans in the General Assembly, are arguing is that they and every other state legislature should be able to make all decisions related to federal elections, which, by the way, would trickle down to state elections, since it's all kind of the same process, without any court review. That they should be able to decide who gets to vote, how we vote, when we can vote, and even what the slate of electors should be, whether or not that's the will of the people, the popular vote, or some other alternate slate of electors, much like Trump recommended that his supporters do. To me, it's a terrifying legal theory. It was considered fringe for 100 years. It would come up every now and then. People, that's crazy. That can't be the law, that legislatures that are inherently political should decide based on their party view how elections should run and who the slate of electors to the Electoral College should be. No, that's not democracy. So it was considered fringe. And now this Trump-infused Supreme Court has decided to take up this case and is apparently, by all accounts, taking it as a serious theory that they may adopt, which I don't think it's hyperbole to say would fundamentally change democracy as we know it. If the popular vote is no longer how we're going to choose president in federal elections, that's terrifying to me. So I worry a lot about that. There's not anything we can directly do as legislators now to change what the U.S. Supreme Court is going to rule on this. But wow, will this be life-changing, democracy-changing if it goes through? And I do worry about having a very partisan group of Trump-supporting people running our legislature if that were to happen.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Senator Marcus gave a great summary of the court case, and in terms of my stance, it's not something I support. If we look at the history of our state over the last decade, I think it's also something that, as we look at our Republican colleagues, they've proven that just within the normal checks and balances that they will, in the court terms, gerrymander to surgical precision, will purposefully target communities, pack them in, crack areas of interest, all in the interest of elevating their own political party. And the very federal maps that we're running in today, which are more indicative of our state's makeup, like where we have closer to 50-50, is because the court saw that they were unconstitutional and intervened in the will of the people. So as we start to flirt with the idea of removing that oversight and the very checks and balances that our state and nation were built upon, I think we get to a very dangerous time for democracy. And as Senator Marcus said, there's not much we can do about it now. But I think when you think that that very case is being elevated because North Carolina Republican leadership, it does paint a really clear picture of where, folks are standing on the issue.
I agree with my colleagues, Senator Marcus and Senator Salvador, and I think they've summarized that quite well. We have to realize that we have three branches of the government. We have the executive, legislative, and judicial branch of government. And we have the Republicans who are strongly standing out there trying to make rules on their own, following the rules of Donald Trump. When it comes to things that happen on the federal level, we know that it trickles down to the state level and then to us locally. So we have to be vigilant and work very hard that the will of the people continues to be the will of the people. They come to us weekly with signs saying that they want to get rid of the electoral college. They want to change how everything has been done, everything that works, they want to throw it out. And so we must stand firm to make sure that we as legislators in Raleigh work to maintain the will of the people and let people know that this is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people, and not for those Republicans who are trying to dismantle what's been done.
Okay.
I can't help but draw on some skills solving problems, because the first thing I always do is to ask, what is the problem? We need to recognize and appreciate the three branches of government and the need for a balance of power. I believe the problem that we're dealing with is really a problem of partisanship, and it's severe. And especially at this particular time, over the last 20 years, I would say, it has really gotten bad with regards to partisanship. The judges would step in, be they the North Carolina judges who made their ruling, North Carolina Supreme Court made their ruling, went to the Supreme Court, and we can expect something different. And the reason is partisanship. I was really dismayed when North Carolina switched from not having the R and the D behind the judges to putting that behind the judges. As much as they are supposed to render impartial justice, they are really partisan as well. And that's unfortunate for all of us. You will hear today, I'm sure, a lot about a supermajority. It's as if those who are speaking against a supermajority is saying, our party do not want to be a supermajority. If that's the case, I applaud them, because being a supermajority is not good, especially when there's extremism on both sides. We have a problem with our democracy, and the problem is we have too much partisanship and too few people willing to work together to solve problems for the good of our community.
Thank you. Rashid.
Can I clarify something real quick? So UNC Charlotte's in District 40, right?
That's right.
Okay, so my question is, like, during the pandemic, a lot of people like lost funding and stuff, and like some of the programs that were cut, like this global engagement. And I just wanted to ask, like, what you guys would do to like increase funding for schools and like particularly like global engagement, like how you guys would engage them and improve funding for those programs.
Well, when it comes to programs, we fund a budget, and the legislator funds that budget gives money to the schools. And the schools, it's up to them to determine how they want those funds to be allocated. We can't initially say, we want you to give this much for geography, this much for history. They determine that from the budget that they're given. They have what you call the Board of Governors that helps to regulate what happens with schools. But we don't do the everyday work or even macromanage what schools do with the funds.
Do you want anyone else to address that? Are you okay with that? Rashid, you want someone else to? You okay with that? Okay.
I would add, one of the big fights we have as Democrats in the Senate is trying to increase funding for education from pre-K through university. We have a massive state budget surplus right now. It's last time I checked, I think it was $7.6 billion of money that we are sitting on. It's taxpayer money, and we are not spending it on anything. We're just sitting on it. And that we have an unprecedented amount, several $1 billion set in a rainy day fund, and we still have this massive surplus. So to me, I feel like let's invest this money in things that matter. And for me, education is always at the top of that list, because that is how we invest in our future. That's how we build for success. That's how we prepare kids to be what we want them to be, right? And not just kids, but adults who are in college and need those classes and need those professors. And so I wish we had control down there to write our budget the way we would, because education, public education, again, from pre-K through public university, would be a much higher priority than it is under the control that we have down there now.
Good morning. So from this side of being a spectator, it seems like when you support a particular party in North Carolina state legislators, it feels like almost watching the Washington Generals play the Harlem Globetrotters. In a sense, like it's hard to have hope when you know you're in such a predicament where you know the opposition has the majority. So what are some things that your constituents can get excited about that you initiated throughout circle?
Okay, we'll start with Bob.
Well,
No, Bob.
Yeah.
You want me to start? Yeah, Salvador.
Okay. So, and I completely get that. And one of the reasons why we talk about the supermajority is because we do have Governor Cooper, and having a Democratic governor and a Republican legislature that cannot overturn his vetoes does lead to the ability to find some consensus, compromise, and move things forward. It may not be as ambitious or quick as we'd like, but we do see some impacts. A few of those could be evidence, such as in transportation. I know I talk to constituents all the time in my district talking about traffic and talking about our growth and how people can just do simple things like get to the grocery store or the school. And one of the things that was incorporated bipartisanly, which I supported and co-sponsored, was essentially transferring the way in which we fund DOT such that it has already moved about 7 Mecklenburg projects back in the pipeline to be built out. It's just one step of many, but it is something to move forward. Something I also work with Governor Cooper on is around clean air and clean water. That bipartisan piece of legislation took about 4.5 months, about 50 different versions of negotiation for the bill, but ultimately it does move us forward in a pathway to address clean air in our state and gives control to our utility commission. Additionally, one piece of legislation that I'm proud to have worked on is something that affects women's health. So about 1 in 9 women are essentially probably chronically underdiagnosed for an illness called lipedema. So I was proud to support that, as well as help to bring dollars for North Carolina businesses. So a piece of legislation I sponsored has already funded 7 Charlotte businesses $75,000 in matching grants. So that's non-dilutive funds for them to essentially help expand their business. A number of those are in my district and Black businesses. So I think we can still find pathways to move things forward. But we also are very much on the defense. We are very much making sure some really detrimental things to voting rights, et cetera, do not happen. So we kind of have to make sure we keep an eye on both sides.
Okay. We have quite a few questions that we need to get to. So does anyone else do we need someone else to address that question that was just asked?
Not her.
Okay. Nancy, I think I saw your hand.
Thank you. How do you define environmental justice, and what will you do in the next term to address environmental injustice? If each one could give a small answer, please.
Yeah, I don't mind starting with that. As an engineer, I've been involved at the national level dealing with environmental issues. As an employee of Mecklenburg County government, I have been actively involved with water quality, air quality. In fact, there was a facility in West Charlotte that was polluting the streams, the Stewart Creek, polluting it. I was directly involved in getting that corrected. I've been involved in correcting Superfund sites right here in Mecklenburg County. As an engineer, I have the expertise to look at environmental issues. I believe in climate change. I think the science is there to justify it, and we need to do all that we can to help preserve our planet for the future. That doesn't sound like a really conservative response, but it's reality. We need to pay attention to our environment. We need to pay attention to the areas that have been treated unjustly from an air quality perspective, water quality perspective. We operated an incinerator in the University City area. In my role as Director of Engineering and Building Standards, I ordered the incinerator to be closed because of the air pollution that it was given. That decision was upheld by both the county manager and also by the Board of County Commissioners. That was the right thing to do. So we need to always look at what's happening as what is the problem, work together to do the right thing. And environmental justice, paying attention to that, is the right thing to do.
Okay, Senator Waddell.
Yeah, no, we have a big problem in eastern part of North Carolina when it comes to environmental justice with the hog farms and what they're doing in that part. It affects everybody, all of this entire state. So there have been laws, there have been legislation and legal battles that I'm proud to say a difference has been made. What they were doing was using part of the waste, and it was being put into the air. And we're continuing to make a difference in that part of the state. We have laws, we have legislation for clean air and clean water. And it affects all of us when it comes to burying of ashes throughout the state, when it comes to dumping throughout the state, and we've put forth laws that will make those things illegal when it harms people. Our governor came to Charlotte and we opened some stations, electric stations, that will improve the quality of air because it allows electric cars to have places that they can fuel up and it does not put a lot of pollutants in the air. So we're working on it in different phases throughout the state. It affects Mecklenburg County and affects the entire state. But environmental justice is something that we're working on each and every day in Raleigh to make it good for the people and for health care for all of North Carolina.
Okay, Senator Marcus.
So environmental justice to me is about making sure you think about the people and the future of our natural environment, at least as much as you think about the profits of the corporations that are trying to pollute. There is a constant battle there because it's usually cheapest, it's most profitable for corporations to dump, to hide, to not clean up the mess that they make. That's how it's better for their profits. And that, corporations, that's what they worry about, right? Their profits and their stockholders, shareholders. And so we need legislators who are going to say, now, wait a minute. So in the case of Duke Energy, they, for 50 years, put coal ash right along the banks of the lakes that are the water source for Charlotte. Many of those lakes are right on the edge of my district. And so at first I'll give them at the beginning, we didn't know how bad coal ash was. When they first started doing it, okay, it wasn't malicious. But now we know that coal ash causes thyroid cancer and all kinds of other terrible things. And so I believe it's government's responsibility to say that has to get cleaned up. And guess who should pay for that? Duke Energy, the person, the corporation that polluted it, not ratepayers, and we shouldn't be forced to just feel the impacts of that environmental damage for decades. That's not justice, right? And so that's one way that it plays out for us. I mean, there's so many different ways. There's the gasoline spill in Huntersville. That's the largest gasoline spill in the history of the United States, happened in my district. And the people who live near it have almost zero information about how is this getting cleaned up? How did this happen? How big is the spill? And so in that case, environmental justice is making sure that it gets cleaned up right, and that the people who live nearby understand what risks it's causing to them and their wells and other things.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we've heard some good summaries. To me, very similarly, environmental injustice is essentially the pollutants and other negative environmental impacts being put on the back of people who are already overburdened, whether that be with healthcare, lower income. And I saw this very firsthand in my nonprofit work. We would frequently see that people of color, Black people, Latina people, they would spend more per square foot on energy costs than their white counterparts. If you look at the history of redlining, you will see that literally communities are hotter in Black communities than, again, white counterparts. And so when you start to think about the environmental impacts of our society, you can quickly see how it's not aligned, and it does follow both racial and economic indicators. And then when you start to add into the equation of where a polluting site may be located, or where, where these things will be sited, it is, again, because of profits and other market reasons, it's easier to put in, again, an already overburdened community. And so for us, it's really making sure we create legislation that can safeguard against that, something that was in the governor's budget that Senate Democrats also advocated for, was like repurchasing some of the hog farm land that was flooding, when we had all those hurricanes, and it was causing just such environmental hazard and mess, and just having the state buy that so that it's no longer a risk for the communities around it. So we have to get creative about addressing these, but it can be found from energy to water to so many environmental areas, and we just have to figure out and try to drive those solutions.
Chris.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. My question is, structurally, the foundation of America was created for white men. Now that you're in this structure, what are you doing to dismantle this system that's it's still beneficial mainly for white men? As a Black woman, not a woman of color, Black woman, I feel like when I go to the polls, and even as a kid, like I've always volunteered, I've always been in the atmosphere of voting, but I feel like I am not represented. Because it's I feel like it's crumbs, and we're not getting to the root of so many issues. And what is it that's being done to change this corruption, lies, just everything? What is being done, or is it a want to change the system?
Joyce.
I think we can change this. I think we, as women, African American women, which you just mentioned, how can we be involved? I think the narrative is changing. It's slow. Sometimes it takes a lot of time for progress, and sometimes it's not. It's short-lived. We have an African American female as Vice President of the United States. We've never seen that before. So some progress is being made. We have an African American woman who is the mayor of Charlotte. So that's progress that's being made. So we are at the table, and it's often said, if you're not at the table, and the table is there for us, that we become part of the menu. So I can see a lot of changes that's being made, and it's slow, but African American women and women in general are making a difference. In state legislatures, in fact, in the Senate now, we have more women than we've ever had. And we're making a difference in our roles and what we do in our communities. So each and every day, we're reaching out to our constituents, involving women on committees, involving women in legislation as we make rules, as we make government. Women are deeply involved because we care and we want to make a difference for all people. We're reaching out, and women are coming to us each and every day in groups, coming to the General Assembly, speaking to us, saying what's needed and what they want, and we're listening. So a change is coming. You may not see it explicitly, but it's there and it's continuing to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. So before 2020, I don't think there had been a Black woman under 40 that served in the North Carolina State Senate. And as Senator Waddell mentioned, we have more now, but it does show, and I look, because they put us on the back row, and I look at the General Assembly building, and it's a lot of white men. And you think about that is because it's structurally built that way. So even in terms of pay, the pay is less, you spend a lot of time away. It's harder for a younger person or even somebody that still has to have a job to serve. So that's one element. But then we also talk about just like in terms of some voter suppression and gerrymandering is really difficult to move forward the will of the people when structurally they are being silenced by the way that the districts are drawn. And so we have filed, and I think even before my first term, Democrats have continuously filed over the last decade pieces of legislation that look at independent redistricting commissions, that look at automatic voter registration, that look at ways to make it possible that we are removing barriers for people to exercise their fundamental right to vote. Because as we get more people involved and we can actually get a makeup of a state that looks like the people is representing, then we have better avenues and paths to actually get that will to be heard. And so it is, while we can see those small successes, I don't think it necessarily echoes the electorate that we represent or serve. And there is still much more to be done and much more to go. But it has been, particularly when gerrymandering and voting rights and getting people's voices heard, so that they can elect people that actually align with their values and not have a race essentially decided because a legislator drew a map because they wanted that party to win, is, I think, a first step to then trying to really push for more progress. And you can see in other states that are making more momentum, you can start to see some essentially coincidence with addressing some of the previous egregious gerrymandering to doing that. So.
I don't know if you want to hear from the white woman on this. I wanted to make sure, right? I would add to what they said. I don't want to be presumptuous and try to answer your question because I am not you, and I acknowledge that. I do share with you being a woman, and I definitely feel those frustrations as well. I will add to what my colleagues have said that I'm really proud of our Senate Democratic Caucus. We are a very diverse group. We have more people of color than white people in our group. There's only 22 of us statewide. There's only 22 Democrats in the whole state Senate. But the majority of us are Black. We have some people of Indian descent. So I'm really proud of that diversity. Our leadership is all people of color. We have about, I think it's 40% of us are women. Is that about right? Mm-hmm. And so within our caucus, it looks like the electorate, and that's great, and we're proud of that. They do, as Senator Salvador said, the Republicans make us all sit on the back row, farthest away from the seat of power. But within our group, we make sure that the voices of Black people are heard and women are heard, and that, we work very cooperatively. Our leader is Dan Blue, who we're very proud to have as our leader. He's a statesman, African-American attorney from Raleigh. And we look to him for leadership and guidance in all the things that we do. So I don't know if things are changing fast enough, but they are changing.
Yeah, may I respond as well?
Okay.
I wish I had about 6 hours to respond to that. I sat down and looked back over my life, and I wrote the story of my life. You singled out white men, basically, in your question. When I look back over my life and everything that I've gone through, from touching my granddad, who held the hand of my great-granddad, who was actually a slave, it creates in me a lot of passion about the history and what happened. But after I sat down and put to paper my story, I realized that one thing I need to avoid against, and that's resentment. Because resentment turns into anger, and anger turns into divisiveness. The whole thing that we talk about when we talk about race is really a social construct. We are different colors. If you look at the spectrum, you will find people of all different colors. We need to get beyond that, and we need to remove the resentment and work together as human beings, children of God, working together to do the right thing. We need to do that. So I challenge all of you to look back at your life story. Ask yourself, is there anything in my life that I can be resentful about? I think the answer would probably be yes. That's past. What can I do about it? I can look ahead to the future and work together again for the betterment for this particular community and for our state. But I do wish I had more time.
Good morning. My name is Dave Price, and I work in advocacy for Habitat for Our Regions. And so I'd be curious, looking at what the state can do around appropriations for housing. We have a housing crisis, obviously, in this region, specifically with affordable home ownership and affordable housing, people being able to purchase homes. So can each of you address what you are doing as an elected official with housing, specifically the Housing Trust Fund, increasing that, we need to get it up way too low, but also what you can do around housing, and that would be for the candidates.
Okay, let's start with Senator Salvador.
Sure. So yeah, you absolutely touched on it. The Housing Trust Fund is something that we've been advocating for an increase because it can supply critical home repairs. Something that I also, given my background in energy affordability, advocated for was weatherization increase of funding, which we did see in the budget in July, because that can also be used for home repairs. It's not as critical like a roof, but it can do home repairs that can help with not just the energy affordability, but also just comfort in air quality. In addition to that, something that we introduced was around inclusive zoning. So essentially trying to give our local governments more control as they are talking with developers to mandate a certain amount of affordable housing. So not necessarily mandating at the state level, but seeing how we can help to elevate local governments in their efforts. Those have been a few things that, we've advocated for in the past year. But yeah, I completely agree that we have to continue to work and move the needle on that.
Okay, Waddell.
Thank you. Absolutely. I echo what Senator Salvador has just said. Our budget is about a 400-page document that we vote on. And in that budget is contained a lot of the things that you mentioned. Funds for habitat so that houses can be built. And it is also the Housing Trust Fund that's in it. And that budget is also funds for the elderly. We have what you call the Homestead Act, and that's been around for a long period of time. But what that equals to is really not enough money for those who've been living in those homes for a long period of time to be able to get a tax reduction. But it does help. So in our budget, we're increasing that to make certain that people who've been gerrymandered out of their districts, people who for some reason are being forced because of the increases in taxes, have an opportunity to live there. Just recently, we've volunteered, so a lot of the money that comes from the state will come to our communities. So we go out and volunteer and work in many of those communities. In fact, we were just at Hidden Valley, that neighborhood, where they were building houses for people who were living there for a long time and could not afford to remain in that community. So we continue to work in the local communities as directed from our state budget. Thank you.
Okay,
Sure. So as Senator Salvador was talking, I pulled up the bill so we can be very specific that we filed Senate Bill 791, this most recent cycle. And all three of us were co-sponsors of that bill. And it would do the two things that the state is most able to help with on the issue of affordable housing. As an aside, it's more of a local issue because the money comes to your counties and your cities and they decide how to spend it and whether to spend it on affordable housing and how to do that. That's a local government issue. But at the state level, there's two things that we should do, that this bill would do if we could get it passed. One would be permit local governments to require inclusionary zoning, Senator Salvador mentioned, because right now state law, it's either fuzzy about whether municipalities can require inclusionary zoning or it's not permitted. And it's in litigation right now in Davidson, where I live. They're in court about it because the town has said when developers want to build here, you can build, but you have to set aside 15% of the units to be affordable units. We in Davidson think that's a great policy. I, as a state legislature, think that a local government should be able to do that if that's what the people there want. The state house will not allow it. State legislature has said, no, that's not something a local government can do. So that's what this bill would fix. And then the other part is it appropriates $10 million to the Housing Finance Agency because it costs money to build new units, right? And so if we could get a bill like this passed, it's so simple, it's one page, but it would make such a big difference. But we're blocked by a Republican majority that won't even let us have this bill be debated, let alone heard or voted on at the General Assembly.
okay.
I didn't hear anything in the bill that I would have an issue with, and I agree that housing, affordable housing, is a local issue. There's a lot of subsidies, and we need to be able to say that we subsidize rental income, we subsidize housing, and that's okay. What I do believe we need to be careful about is the quality of houses. Things are getting more and more expensive as inflation rises. We don't want to just go out and throw up stuff that 5 years down the road will be falling down, dilapidated. We need quality housing, and quality housing costs money. If, from a local perspective, if we want to subsidize housing, fine, that should be done, and I support that. And again, I believe it should be at a local level. If a local community wants to have inclusionary zoning, that should be their choice, and the state should not be in the way of doing that. But we need to figure out what is the problem and then work together to solve the problem with housing.
Okay, what I'd like to do is change the time. We'd like to ask you, the audience, to take 30 seconds, no commentary, and ask the question. If you would answer it in a minute or less, the question, because we have about 7 people, we'd like to get to all of the questions that they have. So we're going to start with the gentleman in the back who just came in with his question. We're going to give him a minute if he needs to ask the question, and a minute for you all to answer. And then you're next, sir. And after you, we would have Rashid again and Tommy. And I have Rondo here. I have Rashid, Tommy, Jackie, the gentleman here, and then we have Rondra, and then Sarita, and that's going to end it with Sarita. Rodney, I'm sorry. Yes, Rodney is on here as well. We'll end it with Rodney. So you have your question, sir.
Yes, hi, how you doing? So my name is Earl Owens, and I work for Genesis Project One, which is a community-based organization that we address, mental health, behavioral health, substance use, and more specifically homelessness. So I had heard DeAndrea Salvador. That's right. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
So I heard you mention that you work with nonprofit organizations. Okay. So and as I walked in, I heard that Mr.
Shields.
Mr. Shields speaking about, fair and affordable housing and things like that, right? But we already know. Oh, okay. So, what can you all do to help us nonprofit organizations be a part of the funding process when it comes to combating homelessness in real time?
Me? What I learned in my first term is that some organizations can be incorporated in the state budget, and there are ways to do that through specific bills. I will just be very candid and say that sometimes in that budget, our Republican leadership will kind of pick and choose which organizations they back. And sometimes the avenue could be trying to advocate for our local government, and then that local government can appropriate. Some kind of more general things around mental health was a number of bills, and I think we got a shorter time. I believe we introduced this past year a general mental health act, as well as supporting mental health professionals for schools, as well as mental health within police departments, I believe was introduced. So that has been a number of things that focus on. I'll just admit mental health is not my area of expertise, but it is something that I know interacts with homelessness and another of other issues around our community. So it needs to be supported. I think I'm at time and I'm happy to talk more after since it's so short.
Okay, Senator Waddell.
Okay, concerning homelessness, as Senator Salvador just mentioned, in our budget, Republicans pick and choose those that they want to come forward. And we file those bills each and every time that we have an opportunity. Sometimes they don't even get out of committee. But we're continuing to work with the funds that are available that relates to our local communities, the funds that are available for home ownership that comes from Raleigh, but it's given to our local government, and the government determines how it's going to be used. But now that you've mentioned that, we'll continue to file those bills, and we'll continue to work with our Republican colleagues, asking them to help us to bring those bills out of the committee, because they're the ones that can do it. And they often refer to us as the people on the back row. And they let us know that they're not going to do what we want them to do. That sometimes they're permitted not to even talk with us about things. So we'll continue to do that to move forward, because homelessness is not something that we should have in a city as affluent as Charlotte.
Okay, Senator.
Sir.
Marcus, you want to add?
Sure. Well, I will. We're trying to pull up the specific numbers to give you an answer. It's always hard when you don't know what the questions are in advance to come prepared. But there's $15 million in the last state budget for emergency rehousing services, rapid response services to prevent homelessness. So it's on the radar. Could we do more? Yes. Should we do more? Yes. I would say, in addition to what my colleagues have already mentioned, one thing that we should do immediately, we should have done a decade ago, is expand Medicaid, because that is the best way to get mental health services to the most people who don't have it right now. That is one of the biggest fights we have. We are very united as Senate Democrats in that bill. That's one of the few bills that we all sign on to, because we all know how important it is. It would not only cover 600,000 by estimates, people who don't have any health insurance, and they'd get them not just, physical service, but mental health services. But it would be a boon to our economy. So many reasons why we should expand Medicaid and help people in that way. I will also say I was active in an effort to get mental health first aid training in the schools, so that is a way for people who are not professionals in mental health to at least be able to identify and know the first steps to get help for someone who is at risk. And so I supported that as well. I'm out of time.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thanks. First, thanks for being a service provider and providing the service there. I've been involved with administering of the mental health services in Mecklenburg County for a long time. And I believe there's a serious problem with the mental health system in North Carolina. There's been so many changes. I remember when it was area mental health. Then we went to Cardinal. All of that's directed by the state. And I lost track. I don't know who is actually the provider now that's dishing out funds to the service provider. But that's part of the problem, the instability in the system. We need to make sure that we have a good process in place so we can direct the funds where they need to be, so we can finally start really dealing with the real issues of mental health that we have here in this community.
Okay, you, sir.
Harvey Gantt recently led a task force to make recommendations for the future of public transit in our community. One of the recommendations is to increase the sales tax, but we cannot vote on it unless the General Assembly gives it permission. Would you support allowing us to vote on the sales tax? And if you support it, would you lead a leadership effort to get the General Assembly to do that?
Okay, we're not a lot of better. We will start with you, Joyce, answering that question.
The answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
I will say yes, but I think a better plan than just raising sales tax in Mecklenburg County is to look at it as a regional approach, because our neighboring counties are the ones that are really going to benefit as well from a transit system that brings people in from Cabarrus County and neighboring counties. And so I don't think it should be just Mecklenburg County residents paying that additional tax. But I do think it should be ultimately up to the voters to decide whether we want to support that transit system, not Republicans in Raleigh, which is who's deciding it now, by saying we can't even have that referendum here.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, with a good plan for transportation and for transit, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Rashid, you have the next question.
Will you guys continue to support like abortion in North Carolina?
Okay. I mean, I didn't hear the question.
I didn't hear it.
Abortion.
Abortion.
Rights or abortion?
There's a difference.
What's your rights?
The answer to that is yes.
Yes, and we all co-sponsored, which Senator Marcus is a primary, Senate Bill 888, but I'll let Senator Marcus talk more about that.
The Senate Bill 888 is the other bill. I told you Medicaid expansion is the one we all agreed on. The other one is Senate Bill 888, and it would codify the protections of Roe v. Wade and Casey v. Planned Parenthood into North Carolina law. So in short, that means that the status quo that we had before the Dobbs decision threw everything up in the air and made women wonder whether we have a right to control our own bodies anymore and under what circumstances. It would just take us back to that time in North Carolina before the Dobbs decision, when it was a private decision between the pregnant person and her doctor. And, you know, that does not mean, I will clarify, because the right always wants to make it sound like we're encouraging abortion. We're not encouraging abortion. We're allowing people to make decisions for themselves. And we also do not agree that abortion should be at will up until the point of birth. No one thinks that. No one thinks an abortion late in the term for a healthy baby is appropriate, and no doctor would perform an abortion in those circumstances. So that is also not what we believe. Don't believe them if they say if they say that that's what we support. We don't.
I'm actually glad to hear that, because I do hear on the extreme that it's the woman's choice and it should be allowable up to the point of birth. I feel that government should never have been involved in telling a woman what she could do with regards to abortion. If government has to be involved, then I do believe that there is a limit to protect the unborn at a certain point in time. I do believe that if the government has to be involved, and I'm glad to hear that the other people here agree with that as well, that there should be, it shouldn't be up to birth if government has to be involved, if government has to be involved.
Okay, I'm gonna put in a commercial. Next week, we're gonna have the North Carolina House Districts 88, 92, 98, 99, 101, and 102. However, it's Sarah Stevenson's birthday. So we're gonna have a party for her from 10 until 10:45. But most of you all will be here, but we have to remove ourselves from this room at 10:45 after her birthday, because there's another meeting at 11 o'clock. So we invite all of you to come back if you can.
everybody that is here to celebrate, her birthday. Now,
And let me, if we can just add one more thing to that. What we're asking everybody to do is bring a birthday card for Sarah and write whatever sentiments you want on that card so that when she leaves here, she can take them back with her and read them at her leisure in the coming days. And I think that we're not going to have a lot of time to talk with her while she's here, but the cards will be able to have their sentiments. So if everyone that comes would bring a card, a happy birthday card for Sarah.
Okay, now, we can get to Tommy, Jackie, the gentleman, here in the blue shirt, and the lady in the back, Rhonda, and, Sarita, and Rodney. So if you all would give them 30 seconds, time to give them a minute to answer, so we can get to this. So, go.
My question is, like, how much why don't you look at other organizations in spending money, just like the Mormons build houses through the church, like they have, most construction is labor. But why you spend so much money on a house like $200,000 when you can get the people who live in the house like Habitat for Humanity, or you can get it built cheaper, Like why we appropriate so much money to certain organizations?
Okay, Tom.
Okay, and we're gonna start with Bobbie, if you can give us an idea on how you can do that.
I think I've already addressed that. We need to be careful with the quality of houses that we build, because history has shown if we don't build in quality, and quality is expensive. So I don't have a problem with the locally subsidizing houses and looking for examples of how other people are doing it and trying to emulate that. I saw some good examples about smaller units that could be built. And I think if we look around the country, we'll find that there are a number of things that we can do differently and better than what we're doing now.
Okay, Senator Mark.
Not sure I understand the question, and I know we don't want to.
The question is why corporations get so much money to do jobs that the average person can do. Just like if you go to Utah, Mormons build their own houses. Most construction is labor.
Mm-hmm.
And so why you spend so much money on housing and such, and all this money go to major corporations?
Okay, do you all understand the question? And if you don't feel comfortable answering,
I'll respond the best I can. So we, as the state government, aren't giving money to corporations to build houses. So that's why I think I'm not understanding the question. We do help. The money that we're appropriating, so what you're referring to is the $10 million that we want to put in the housing fund. That's to incentivize developers, because they're already going to build an apartment in your neighborhood and everywhere else, right? But we want to incentivize them to include in that some affordable units. Otherwise, they won't do it at all, because they just want to maximize their profits. So what we're trying to do in a free market economy is incentivize them to do what we're not allowed to require them to do. So that is, when you're going to build, fine, build what you're going to build, but think about the community, and what we need is at least a few, 10%, 5%, the affordable units.
That's not much.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Senator Salvador.
Yeah. So I will say that something that I've supported and advocate for is apprenticeship, co-ops, and as well as essentially job training. I think that could be a good pathway. I think Habitat as a nonprofit has a great model. I will say that we spend, when we're in session Monday through Thursday in Raleigh, and Senator Marcus is our chair, and something that we can even do virtually is sometimes we will meet with organizations or government entities to learn about programs that we need to support. So sometimes it can be as simple as making sure that we're aware so we can properly advocate if and when that opportunity comes up. But I do agree that we should be, if this is going to be a growing economy for building houses, for making them more energy efficient with the federal legislation, then let's see how many people we can either get retrained to be a part of that, or if they're in school, they know that that's a pathway. So that's something that I think we can help to support as well.
Okay.
You mentioned about housing and about what some of the other communities, the Mormons, were doing. So we don't macromanage, but we do provide the funds to give to local communities and allow them to have authority over some of the things and programs that they want to bring forward in those various communities, like funds that Habitat has already mentioned, Housing Trust Fund, apprenticeship programs for students. So there are other opportunities, but you can't tell each community exactly what that community is to do.
Okay, did you want to address that, or did you address that?
We all did.
Yeah, I think we all did.
Okay, Jack.
Good morning again. 15 seconds. I grew up in the Black Belt of North Carolina. Can you give, one of you, can you just give us the status of the DeAndrea case?
Okay, starting with Waddell.
Well, right now, the DeAndrea case, we're looking for $785 million to be put in bringing that case forward so that the things that they've mentioned can be brought to fruition. And it says that every student in North Carolina must have a sound basic education. And this case has been dragging over for more than 20 years, saying that it does not exist. But it does not, even though the judges and the courts made the order, it does not direct the General Assembly to take that money, $785 million from our budget, to carry out the case. So we as Democrats are strongly working and encouraging this General Assembly to come up with the money to make certain that the education for all of our students is what it needs to be, that when they finish high school, they're ready for the world of work, higher education, the military, or they're ready to start their own businesses. We'll continue to do that. And we're hoping that our Republicans colleagues will join with us because it's so necessary that we move that forward.
Okay, Jackie, are you okay with that response? Or do you want to hear from anybody?
Just one was good.
Okay, sir, you're in the.
Yeah. So very simple yes or no will suffice, but you provide context. We've had copycat bills that don't say gay or trans show up in North Carolina, including in our state senate this past year where it passed through. If it comes back up next year, will you vote against any anti-LGBTQ legislation, including those that target LGBTQ youth? For all of you.
That community has the same rights as anyone else. And just like my stance on abortion, I don't believe the government should be involved in telling people what they can and cannot do. But with regards to rights, the rights should be there and shared with all Americans, all citizens in this country should have those same equal rights.
Okay.
I can't remember if the right answer is yes or no, how you raised the question, but I will do what I've always done, which is to stand up for LGBTQ people, kids, and everybody's equal rights.
Yeah, I similarly will stand up for LGBTQ rights and oppose legislation that's harmful and put forward.
Senator Waddell?
Absolutely, I will stand up for LGBTQ rights. And we've had legislation that's brought that forward when it comes to our education, when it comes to what we teach in the schools. And I'm strongly for the rights for all of us.
Okay, Roger.
Hi, y'all. I'm Ronnie Stinneford, 501c nonprofit, affordable housing. My question is, we are trying to build our way out of homelessness, and it's not going to happen. I think we should look at foreclosures. I've been on foreclosures, and I think that might be a way that we can kind of tap into a lot of housing, because we can outbid some of these investors because they have a budget bill, and we can tell that Habitat has kind of picked up that model also.
Okay.
On foreclosures also.
And your question? Did you have a question?
No, just ask them what they think about foreclosures as a opportunity of affordable housing.
Okay, starting with Salvador.
It's not something I've personally looked into. I think it's really interesting. I would love to talk to you about it. Something that we looked at on a similar end was the Heirs Property Act, where in a lot of communities, essentially when a grandparent passes away and they don't have a will and it goes down, sometimes what will happen is a corporate investor might go to like a great grandchild and try to buy that property away from the family. And so we did do some legislation with trying to make sure we could help, but I haven't looked into the foreclosure aspect, and I'm open to more conversations. Yeah.
What else would you like to?
Yes, we did provide funds for additional magistrates. And that's something that I think they're working forward to as foreclosures come forward to our court system. And we also provided funds for additional attorneys who are working through nonprofits to help with that. And I think we'll see a difference there when it comes to foreclosures. Locally, we can also work with our county government because what we have each and every year, we have our liaison from the county, from the city, and from the school system. They come to Raleigh and let us know what the things are that they want us to see working on. And certainly that will be one of the things that we can work on as we move forward, the foreclosure aspect of it.
I agree with what my colleagues mentioned in response. I would just add that one other thing that we have tried to do work on that we need to do better on is the homestead exemption. So for older, lower income people, they shouldn't have to pay the full property tax burden, especially when they're in a gentrified neighborhood that is, their property taxes are going up, and they can't do anything about it. And that forces people out and forces foreclosure. So that's one other thing we could do to help.
And I applaud you for coming up with innovative thinking, and we need more of that. And that's certainly something we should look into.
Okay, so
I want to make two statements and then I'm going to ask a question of each of you, and I want one word answer. Number one, sister, you said white men. You left out an adjective. As an old English teacher, old white men. Look at who's making the decisions and look at your panel here this morning. Senator Marcus, I'm very proud of you to be your constituent. Senator Waddell, I'm very proud of you. And your newsletters, started the newsletters. I get 4 newsletters now a month, and I read every one of them. Yours first. My question is, after you are reelected, and if you are elected, what will be one issue that you are going to pursue?
she's been very clear. Just give one answer.
Education.
Marcus,
Reproductive freedom.
Salvador,
Health.
and what else?
Medicaid expansion and education, because I'm an educator.
Okay, and last but not least, Rodney has a question, and I think it's gonna require some talk, some rhetoric from you guys. So Rodney, you can go ahead and give your last one.
Roger, got it.
Rodney. Rodney.
But simply put, we talked about education. You mentioned the DeAndrea case. I want to pivot in another direction. Something that I've been very transparent about during my legislative career is I support parental choice. Parental choice. Parental choice in education. So, I mean, we have this big bear in the room, Tasha, called Opportunity Scholarship. And so what is your stance for Opportunity Scholarships? And since it's already in place, how can we use it for what it's supposed to be done for, which is to help uplift at-risk kids and help kids and not have it corrupted into having more of a situation where you have people who don't need any type of assistance take advantage of it, because it's here. And so how do we navigate now that it's here? I know you're not a fan of it, but just want to hear your opinion.
Let's start with Bob.
We should encourage a choice. Our parents should have the choice to send their children where they want to. If you think back, I can imagine that each of you know of people who are not sending their children to public school right now. So we have the choice. It's whether or not the state will continue to support through Opportunity Scholarship and other options and actually provide funding for those who choose alternative to education. So I certainly support the opportunity.
Okay, Senator Mark.
So I like parental choice. I myself, as a parent, chose to send my children to various public schools. At one point, even I paid for a private school because that's what my child needed in that moment. Charter schools, public charter schools where you don't have to pay a cent to go. All that's great. Magnet schools, CMS has thousands of magnets. So there's a lot of parental choice without the state funding private schools. And the reason that I don't like the state using taxpayer money to pay for private schools? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One is they're often, they're held to no standards. So they can teach that science doesn't exist. They can teach the dinosaurs walked at the same time as humans. Whatever they feel like teaching, they can teach. There's no standards. The teachers don't have to be certified. So public money going to support that kind of education to me is really problematic. I don't think we're doing right by kids by funding that type of a school. The income limits are way too high. So families that earn what I don't consider to be low income, I think it's up at like $77,000 income now, qualify for low income private school vouchers. That's not appropriate to me. Third, we spend way too much money of our budget for these private school vouchers, so much so that's being put in this lockbox that can't be used for anything else, and very few families are even accessing that money. So there's way more money sitting in this lockbox that nobody's using, and the Republican leadership that loves the voucher program so much won't agree to even shift what's not used back to regular public education. So there's a lot of reasons why the program that we have is not appropriate, in my opinion.
Okay, Salvador.
Yeah, I think Senator Marcus laid a good case. It's like I'm very pro parental choice. My concern lies in that implementation as well as the oversight. So we, just this last year, Republican leadership increased the income level for who qualifies. And then in terms of oversight, we heard about the curriculum standards not necessarily having any kind of check and balance. Also, admissions curriculum, sometimes that can, fall through a gap of which students they're accepting or not, as well as just providing basic things within these schools, whether that be transportation or meal assistance. You can really start to fall into just a really slippery slope. And so I think that Senator Marcus laid a good case for kind of that hesitation, I think, is absolutely warranted.
Thank you. You mentioned opportunity scholarships.
Well, let me give this caveat. I support parental choice, not necessarily opportunity scholarships, but there's a conversation to be had. Let me clear that up so nobody thinks we get out of here.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, you've changed your question. Well, when it comes to that opportunity scholarship, let me address that first. First of all, it was $8,000 per child. Now they've gone to $12,000 per child. A lot of that money is there. Nobody's used it. And because it's basically money that they are recruiting African-American students to come to parochial schools. And so a lot of times that's really not enough money for tuition. Is not enough to take care of a year for those children. So it's something that the Republican leadership have been pushing for a long time. Now, we think about Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. We have almost any kind of program that a student would want to pursue in this school. We have all kinds of magnet programs. We have language magnet programs. We have healthcare magnet programs, military global magnet programs. So almost anything that a student wants to pursue is here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools with our magnet program system. That's why it exists. So I don't see a student getting an opportunity scholarship and going someplace else when they can get whatever good education they want right here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
Let's give them a round of applause. We invite you to come back. Of course, we have run over our time, and we're going to try to keep it within the time on the next week. But thank you all so much again. Absolutely. And you see, we have a tough group here. There's a lot of good questions. There's another forum in 2 minutes.